Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me, Jillian.
Yes, of course. So, to start with, do you want to tell the listeners who you are and what do you bring to this world?
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm happy to. So, I'm Meg Androsiglio. I'm a public relations expert and entrepreneur. For 14 years, I was in the corporate PR industry. I represented brands like ASICS, Unilever, PepsiCo, ClassPass, Julep Beauty, many more than that. But I left in 2021 to start my own business. I really wanted to focus on making public relations accessible and easy and productive for small business owners and female founders. So you still get the corporate level marketing and communications that I've been doing for 14 years, but now it's just in a easy to digest, fun and supported atmosphere through my programs and one-on-one offerings. But my mission is really to give everyone a stage to share their gifts, and whether that's through media headlines or partnerships, events, podcasts, which we're going to talk about today, it's all public relations related. And I'm really excited to share it with the world.
Yes, yes. My favorite stage, obviously, is podcasts.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yes, so that's what I want to talk about today. So, how are podcasts or doing podcast interviews a good PR tool for our business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Good PR is really all about achieving that third party credibility. So as business owners, as you know, we could pay for like a Facebook ad or a Google advertisement, but that's not really connecting our business mission or passion to our ideal audience. It's just spreading our name in as many places as possible. And we want to really create that connection with our ideal audience. And that's where placements and podcast interviews are just incredible tools to connect to that ideal audience, because they're already interested in that niche and topic. And now you're taking the time to introduce yourself, introduce your brand in a medium that they're excited about and already participatory in. So you're really building that know, like, and trust.
Yes, that's always what I tell my clients. Know, like, and trust is the thing we work on with you have your podcast.
Oh, huge. It's huge.
Yes, yes. And I know being a guest on a podcast, and even me as a host, we still get really nervous and we're
Mhm.
afraid that our message isn't going to come out clear. So, how can we get our message to come across how we want it to
Mhm.
while we're doing a podcast interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. And messaging is something I'm so passionate about. It is, something you could work on with a business coach or, one-to-one with someone. I think it really does live in like the public relations realm, which is, I might be biased, but why I'm so excited about it. And all my clients, whether or not they've had public relations before, we have to start with messaging first. And if you think about like, if you've ever started listening to a podcast, like it happened to me today, I was really interested in learning more about this specific topic. And I clicked on a podcast and started listening to the host. And I could tell she just like wasn't into the topic at hand. And it really is not an awesome experience, right? You like kind of skip through it and you're like, when are you going to get to what I want to hear about? Then like you keep scrolling and you find a different podcast on the same topic, and the host and the interviewee are really passionate about it. And all of a sudden it's a totally different experience. Like you listen to the full episode, maybe you listen to it twice, you look up the interviewee on Instagram, maybe you take one of her courses, which I've done before,
Yes.
like it's a different relationship building moment. And that all comes through showcasing your passions, but supporting that with incredible messaging. So I really love to have a tangible resource to reference when I'm either in an interview or asked for a quote or on a podcast like this, that when I'm asked a question, I have a place to go back to talk to some of my key talking points, making sure I'm being super clear. So you're sharing your excitement rather than spending time like looking for the right word and wondering what to say.
Yes, that's what I like too. I kind of like to know a little bit of what we're going to talk about ahead, just so I can have notes kind of in my head, like, this is the points I want to make sure I hit. So I
Yeah.
always have something to reference. Yes.
It's so important because we're in our own heads
Yes.
for most of the day, right? So to actually put it out onto paper, maybe it's say it out loud a couple times, make sure it makes sense, makes a world of difference.
Yes, because you get so nervous. Sometimes your mind goes blank and you're like,
Yeah.
oh
Oh
no.
my gosh, it's so true.
I have no clue
I
what
do it
else to
all the
say.
time.
Yes,
Yeah.
me too. Yeah, my first podcast interview was horrible. My mind went so blank and I just like sat there for a few.
I doubt it, but I feel, yeah. Sometimes I listen back. I have my own podcast too. And I listen back sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I really should have written something down before I hit record. And when I do, it's always better.
Yes. Yes. I always have an outline of making sure I hit the points.
Yeah. There you go.
Do you have any advice for how we can pitch ourselves to be on podcasts?
Yeah. So pitching itself is a whole other beast, and we could do a totally different episode and different podcasts on that. But first and foremost, you have to make sure you're listening to the podcast that you're pitching, right? There are so many out there. Of course, I know that, right? But you have a connection with certain podcasts and you know if your brand's going to be a fit if you've been listening to the podcast. And hosts, as I'm sure you can attest to, can tell when they're getting pitched from someone who's never listened to their podcast before. So it's really important to make sure that you are being genuine, you have a genuine interest. Maybe in your pitch, you reference a couple of episodes that really resonated with you, and then you offer to give your perspective on a topic that you're either like an expert in, is in the current culture climate, or something that the host is really passionate about. But you have to make sure that the pitch is about the host and the podcast, not about you, right? Like you are the resource for them to create an amazing episode. You are not like saving them in any way, shape, or form. You are just there to help them as much as you can. And yes, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, but making the pitch more about them and not you is a big, big key tip.
Yes, I've gotten those pitches that are like, I have so many followers on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's great, but like, what are you going to give my listeners? Like,
right, exactly.
What
Why are people going to press play?
Yes, I don't care if you have one follower. Like, if you're going to give value, then
exactly. So true. So true.
So, what are your top 3 tips for coming across like an expert in a podcast interview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's really a combination of that like masculine, feminine working energy. First being the preparing and, you're having your talking points on hand is really important for all the reasons we named before. So you're spending the interview showcasing your talents, your gifts, your offers versus trying to find the right word to say. And sharing relevant experience, sharing stories, like people are tuning in, pressing play, like we said, because they want to hear about you and they want to build a relationship with you and your brand. And you're going to do that through sharing some relevant experience. So make sure you have a couple of stories that you can reference or experience that you want to showcase in the interview as well. And then just be completely yourself. Like it's very clear. I talk with my hands, even though you can't see it, right? And I'm very excited and giggly. And that's who I am as a person. I'm not going to try to change that or sound like a different CEO I heard on that podcast once. I'm totally myself. And that's amazing because we want to create, again, the relationships. People want to get to know you. They don't want to get to know a shell of you or you pretending to be someone else.
Yes, I'm the same way. I'm a little giggly on my...
I think it's great because then you feel like you're in a conversation with someone, you're at a coffee shop, and it's just fun for everyone being interviewed and everyone listening.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So what is the name of your podcast and what's it about?
Yeah. So my podcast is Vision to Voice. I actually named it after my marquee course that I offer. I offer a PR accelerator for female founders. So you learn like soup to nuts what public relations is. And right now I'm talking about introducing entrepreneurs to what PR is, why media relations is important, what kind of results you can expect. And over the next few months, I'm going to start interviewing more and more people for the podcast as well.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Interview skills on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yes, it's very different being a host than being the interviewee.
I'm 100% sure of that. Yeah.
Is there any like other specific things you wanted to talk about? Like we still have some time.
I mean, yeah, that's great. We went through it really fast, didn't we? So I don't know. I feel like the one thing I guess I will say is that public relations is becoming more and more important, right? And I think podcasts is one of those places people kind of overlook, but we should be spending more attention, be paying more attention to. When you think PR, you're like, oh, I want to be on the cover of Time or this piece in Vogue, or I really want to be in a gift guide in New York Magazine. But when I think back to those brands and people, coaches that I really resonate with as a consumer, I've probably found them through a podcast. And I don't know if it's just
Me
me
too.
or if,
No.
yeah, or if it's our generation, but I use the podcast app or Spotify, like Google, like, oh, I want to learn about this. Is there a podcast on it? And then you find someone you resonate with, and then you're down the rabbit hole of the brand and making a relationship with them. So I think from a PR standpoint, I'm really excited about podcasts and podcast interviews and offering those things to my clients. And there's literally like a huge list from each niche that you can kind of go down, right?
Yes.
So it's a great place to kind of get started and explore with your marketing strategy.
Yes, there's a podcast for everything. out there.
Everything.
Yes, you can find one to be on that
Yeah.
is for your
And
niche.
it doesn't have to be like the Goop podcast. You know what I mean? Like you can still make incredible waves and create really awesome relationships, make sales through podcasts that have a couple hundred listeners, a couple dozen listeners, because it's such a dedicated audience.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah. Oh my God. I loved it.
Yes. And can you tell the listeners how they can connect with you?
Yes, of course. You can find me on Instagram at Meg Androsiglio _PR. And my website is mjandrocommunications.com. On my website, I have more information about that PR accelerator course, Vision of Voice, where I teach entrepreneurs how to implement PR in their business, from pitching, messaging, media lists, planning. So you can see your brand in the headlines and in podcast interviews, just like this one.
Great. And I will make sure all those links are in the show notes too. So
Great.
go check Meg out. And thank you again so much. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. It was awesome.